This is the On Blast Podcast NFL Picks Edition. My name is Sheldon Alexander. And as always, I'm joined by my guy, Mr. Matt Russell. It's a holiday season, football season. Things are kicking into high gear. If they haven't already been, I know you got bowl season going for you. We're in the thick of the NHL season. There's the NBA season, sports, and more sports. We had like the craziest weekend of sports, I feel like we just came off of with the World Cup final. And then that going right into an insane NFL day. Like, how are you? Just checking in on my dude here. How you doing?
Well, first and foremost, we're playing hurt a little bit today. The holiday season kind of bucked its head last night a little bit with a little festive jam at a local watering hole. And you know what? I'm too old for this bleep. And honestly, like 3 pints and a shot. And all of a sudden, like the next day, and really just sort of the morning type deal, totally rough scene for your boy. And honestly, I don't even know if it was necessarily like the alcohol intake, because I mean, again, 3 pints and a shot. Again, the shot was probably where things kind of fell apart a little bit. Shouldn't be that big of a deal. But listen, man, for those of us, of a certain age, like you get it. Like you can't go far off the beaten path when it comes to your your week, your day to day, really. And so we end up, at a restaurant for dinner at 10 p.m., and like, forget about the alcohol. If I'm having dinner at 10 p.m., I'm probably going to be in rough shape the next day. Like, that's the situation that we're dealing with here. That, and the fact that, honestly, this NFL deal that we talk about every single week, if that's not enough to force you to a beverage or two, or to just be hung over without the use of a beverage or two, as if this stuff isn't hard enough. We got guys just hucking laterals around the place. And, we'll talk about the teams in these games and whatnot, but oh man, like you watch a guy on Sunday throw the dumbest lateral in the history of sports, and then another guy goes and throws a lateral on Monday night. We're not even learning lessons out here as a group. So I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know what to make of it. That's probably why that shot of rum happened in the festive occasion last night.
Fair enough, my dude. Fair enough. For the people who might not be familiar, what we do here on this On Blast podcast, once a week, we bless your timelines and your eardrums and your visuals, your eyes with some picks for the NFL season. And what happens here? I come out, try to give out a pick on one side or the other. We call this Sheldon Says picks. And Matt will help me with said picks. He comes out with the information and education about where the line was, where it is, and where it could be going heading into game time. And as mentioned, last week, a crazy week in the NFL. I hung on and battled, finished strong with some strong showings from the Sunday night game to the Monday night game and the late game at 4:00 or whatever it was. But just creeping and crawling to a 6-9-1 week. Overall, though, if you listen to the pod last week, I was given a heads up that I wasn't really feeling it heading into last week. And hey, these weeks happen.
But still, honestly, what are you supposed to do? Yeah,
I'm not mad here.
Good God.
The total for the season is still at, we talk about against the spread, 122, 92, and 10 against the spread this season. 30 games up, I'll still take that any day of the week. And plus, as you mentioned, there were some games last week that kind of swung one way or the other. That, I was out on Sunday. Yeah. And so my phone was just blowing up with just the randomness that was going on. And when you really take a look at what happened in that Pats game, for example, that's a win that becomes a loss, that becomes a loss again. And it's just like, how can you be mad at that? I can't be mad at that. All we can say is it's the NFL, and it's why we love it so much. And it's why we're here to do it all over again. It's like the week comes to a close. You feel good about what happened on Monday night. Rested easy on the Packers. Everything was cool. And now we're back at it again, heading into Thursday night football. We got the Jags at the Jets. It's a pick'em game. I'm going to be on the Jags here. Jags are rolling. And I know this is tough, though, because I'm asking the Jags to actually win, which is not necessarily a place I want to be. I like taking the Jags when I can take them with some points.
Yeah, and be surprised when they win,
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
whoa,
good
okay,
job.
they
It's
won
like,
outright. Neat.
yeah, you won outright against the Cowboys. Good job. I wasn't asking you to do all that.
Yeah.
I was happy to sit on the points. So cool. But do you know the place that I really don't want to be?
Right.
Asking Zach Wilson to win a game either.
Yeah.
So for that reason and that reason only, give me the Jags. I don't really like it, but it's a pick'em game. It's Thursday night. We're going to get spicy early on. What say you, my friend?
Yeah, I not loving this game necessarily. The line is correct with like the tiniest of leans for the Jets with Zach Wilson. If it was Mike White, it'd be a little bit more. For my own ratings, I am trying to sort of stay ahead of the Jags rating here because I'm liking what I'm seeing from the Jags. Obviously since they came back from London, it seems to, there's all sorts of, you can go see a bunch of stories about how like it's clicked for Trevor Lawrence, and like maybe that's true. Right? Like maybe that is actually the case. And we judge him, or we've judged his career in the NFL by what he did under Urban Meyer.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe the first 6 games under Doug Peterson. It's like, okay, well now you're getting a little momentum here. And I can already feel the buzz for the Jags next season. Like you're getting Calvin Ridley, like assuming he, is able to actually come back in the league, from the gambling suspension. You'll recall they traded for him at the trade deadline. So like get fired up for, even more Jags hype. There was some low-level Jags hype this year. But it's interesting how, we have these sort of hype situations before the season starts, and it takes some games for that to kind of come to fruition. And on the opposite side of things, you have these teams that we didn't think that much of, before the season started, and they got out to like a 7-2 record, and now all of a sudden they're sort of creeping back. Like that's what sample size is for, right?
Yeah.
And so like the Jags are now, you're getting into the sample size where now what we were hoping for out of the Jags is kind of coming to fruition now. Jets kind of a little bit the opposite, especially when Zach Wilson is involved. We talked last week about the key element to that game potentially being Quinnen Williams, his availability even more so than Mike White's. Well, the Jets are still pretty good defensively, right up until a 4th and inches, and kudos to the Lions who do this on 4th and short, where they put you in an incredibly difficult position by doing these play action passes that inevitably take some of the starch away from the pass rush. They give Jared Goff time. There's always a guy seemingly running free. In this case, it was Brock Wright. Did he need to go take it to the house? Not in my opinion. I would have preferred that he had not done that. But alas, that's the deal. I mean, other than that, it was 2 field goals and a punt return touchdown. So, I just look at it and I go, okay, well, now they're getting Quinnen Williams back from the Jets here. They're playing at home, obviously, but, I don't have all that kind of faith in Robert Saleh at this point, and certainly don't have faith in Zach Wilson. I just think this game's just a really true toss-up, like that kind of perfect Thursday toss-up that, you probably wouldn't be dying to bet except for the fact that it's on a Thursday night. So just one of these deals where I have a small bet, basically like an even money line bet on Jacksonville. So I'm not going to talk you out of this, but it's certainly not something like I'm looking to go to war with here. Part of it is I have, a little futures action when it comes to the Jags, which we might as well talk about too, because I think people are relatively interested in it. But we'll get to there's a lot to talk about when we get to the Philadelphia Cowboys game, for example. But, I wrote this week about all the sort of permutations of that injury to Jalen Hurts. And one such permutation is if the Cowboys beat the Eagles this week, which of course that has become much more likely at a 6-point favorite, then the Cowboys become very interested in their last 2 games. When if the Eagles were to win this game, the Cowboys would be considerably less interested because they would know at that point that they are officially in the 5 seed. Well, the Tennessee Titans are next up on Thursday night for the Cowboys. And so there's going to be a completely different outlook for the Cowboys when whether they win or lose that Eagles game for that Thursday night game against the Titans. And so next week it's the Titans for the Cowboys, and then the following week the Titans have the Jags. So we could be looking at a Jags home game in week 18. Maybe it gets flexed to Sunday Night Football because it is for the division. And the Jags right now are plus 120. And I don't think that price has been changed to reflect the fact that the Titans are going to get probably everything that they could want from the Cowboys as far as an effort is concerned, right? The Cowboys are going to be giving full effort again if they win this game. And again, the probabilities of them winning this game this weekend, are such that you would think that would be the case. So, point is here, there's some Jags potential for them to win the division. And there's a potential, obviously, at plus 120 for that to be a good bet. But if the Jags win the division, and all of a sudden we go, wow, what a turnaround, what an in-season turnaround, what a developmental turnaround for your guy, Trevor Lawrence. Well, who's going to get credit for that? Doug Peterson's going to get credit for that.
Yeah.
He's 25-1 to win Coach of the Year right now. And as part of all of this, the concept, of course, being that the Cowboys beat the Eagles this week. Well, obviously, Nick Sirianni, the current favorite for Coach of the Year, might take a little hit there in the Coach of the Year consideration element, right? Because if they end up going, 15-2, 14-3, a team that was in the playoffs last year, like how impressive is that really, right? In a lot of ways, it's more impressive that Jalen Hurts led them to that record if they lose, one or two games here down the stretch. So there's kind of an opening outside of Sirianni for Coach of the Year. Mm-hmm. And if the Jags come back from like 4 games back or 3 games back of the Titans and win this division, which obviously would need to start with the game this week, I think that's actually more interesting to sort of, it gives you a bet that keeps you interested in this Thursday night game where you go, you know what, instead of betting the game, let's just throw $10 on Coach of the Year, Doug Peterson here. Obviously, you're cheering for Jacksonville this week, and you have this sort of high payout, low risk type of play that you can use on a Thursday night to keep you interested here before Christmas.
Yeah, no, makes a whole lot of sense. And it's almost like I actually produce this pod and send you a script in terms of the order of the games, which I don't, for the record. But the next game that is on the list is the Eagles at the Cowboys. Eagles are 4.5-point underdogs in Dallas. And obviously at this point, we know Jalen Hurts is out. Gardner Minshew is in. Cowboys coming off an embarrassing loss to the aforementioned Jags. This is in the Vegas zone, primed in the Vegas zone. I'm going to be on the Eagles. The reason I'm going to be on the Eagles here, plus the points, it's just because even without Jalen Hurts, I get what the Cowboys are. I get what the Cowboys do. But more importantly, I think the Eagles have just shown that they have different ways to go about their business. And I like that. And I just think everyone will be quick to just jump on the Dallas Cowboys here in kind of a bounce back spot and kind of a situation where, the Eagles will just fall apart without Jalen Hurts. And I think there'll be a downgrade, but I don't think Gardner Minshew is trash. We've seen Gardner Minshew before step in and be a serviceable QB. Mm-hmm. Why can't he do that in game 1 against Cowboys? Give me the Philly Eagles plus the 4.5 points. I was hoping to actually be able to take the Philly with getting more points here, but I'll take the 4.5.
And so that I think is a key thing, right? Because as with everything, we sort of have to start, especially with these, because listen, if you've been listening to this podcast for any amount of time, and then you see somebody get injured and a point spread start to change, your first instinct should be, Matt is going to be fired up about this game, because this is the stuff that like gets me out of bed in the morning, right? Like sort of analyzing where these lines go and where they might go going forward, and all the rating stuff that goes along with it. So obviously this line was going to be 1.5, and it had sort of crept up from a look ahead of Pick'em, because there is just sort of this kind of groundswell, and maybe it's good, maybe it's sort of a too cool for school, a little too sharp for your own good type of thing. But I was looking to bet the Cowboys at Pick'em, so I can't really point fingers at anybody. Mm-hmm. And so it was going to open, or I think actually did open on Sunday at minus 1.5. And of course, nobody thought Hurts was injured. And I was like, wow, there's going to be Eagles money at some point. I'll be able to get the Cowboys at Pick'em. Well, Monday rolls around and it starts leaking. And of course, before the news actually breaks, as it always does, the line starts to move first. And so to understand that this line got to minus 6.5 on Monday is to sort of understand where it could go in the future. So what happens is, right, everybody piles in, just like wheelbarrows, guys running down the street with wheelbarrows of money to like go bet on the Cowboys before, it sort of becomes public that Jalen Hurts is potentially out for this game. And so you see it shoot up, like, and they're just taking Cowboys money and Cowboys money and Cowboys. Okay, 3, 4, 5, 6.5 a little bit. And then somebody comes in and goes like, whoa, I'll buy back. on plus 6.5 and create a little middle. And that might just be, that is, first of all, it's probably somebody who also has Cowboys -1 or -1.5, but it also could just be a guy who was waiting to see how far that was willing to go because he has sort of a ready-made rating on the Minshew related Eagles, right? The Minshew-led Eagles. And so that happens, and we sort of land on 6, right? Because it's, the buyback comes on 6.5, and it goes back down to 6. Then Nick Sirianni comes out, and he starts talking about Jalen Hurts being a dog, and he's got he's freakish when it comes to his healing powers, and we might play him this week, and blah blah blah. But we have to sit back and sort of realize what's actually happening here. And I think when he says that, by the way, that's what triggers the move, because immediately after he said it, it moved to 5.5 and to 5. Okay. And so the more consideration, again, we have these flashbacks to Justin Herbert at the start of the year and Josh Allen, right, where we had massive line moves very similar to these, almost identical, in games that were going to be sort of a different number, have moved by close to a touchdown. We start to think, okay, well, maybe he actually might play. And that's why this line is sort of settled in, as you mentioned, the Vegas zone, literally halfway between where the, Jalen Hurts might be out for the year rumor, which was 6.5, and the -1.5 for the Cowboys that it opened at, right? It's kind of directly in between, with a little bit of a lean towards Hurts not playing. But like I said, we have to look at this from a logical standpoint. Now, again, that doesn't necessarily always work. We didn't think Josh Allen should really be playing against the Vikings. We didn't think, Herbert should be playing against the Jags, right? In both cases, that didn't really go all that well for their team. But we look at it and I go, think about it this way. The Eagles don't need to win this game. I think that was part and parcel with why this reopened at -1.5, because there was sort of a tax on the element of the Cowboys needing to win this game to keep within, honestly, arm's length of the Eagles. Because the Eagles either need to just win 1 out of their next 3 games, I believe both of which after this will be at home against, I think it's the Saints and the Giants, if I'm not mistaken. Both very winnable games that they'll be favored in even if Jalen Hurts doesn't play. Or, by the way, the Cowboys could also lose a game. And, when you talk about the number 1 overall seed, the Vikings could lose a game to sort of lock that up. So this isn't a do or die game for the Eagles, where this is a sort of kitchen sink type game for the Cowboys. So all of that is to say, why would you play Jalen Hurts in this game? Because how do you protect him? Because it's a throwing shoulder. So, okay, you're let's not throw the ball a ton. So we're going to run the ball with Jalen Hurts a ton so that he can get tackled over and over again. This isn't a guy who we can just put in a game plan and just have, throw short passes Brady style and keep him, clean the entire game. That's not the way he plays. And by the way, the Eagles are going to try to win this game because it's, it's like we talked about with the Jags, just cover, but it would be nice if you win. That's kind of the Eagles attitude here a little bit, where it'd be we're not going to play Jalen Hurts, but we're going to still try to win. And part of that is going to be suggesting that Jalen Hurts is going to play. So the Cowboys have to review that tape a little bit.
Hell yeah.
Because this is a guy who is demands your attention from a game planning standpoint. Right. So the longer that they can kind of go and say, Jalen Hurts, he's, he heals quickly and he's a freak. And, if he's healthy, he'll play and all of that stuff, the more disadvantageous that becomes for the Cowboys on a short week to prepare. But it also is a short week for Jalen Hurts to have those healing powers take over. So it all adds up to me to be Gardner Minshew. So if you're going to play this and you have it sort of stamped here at +4.5, but in real life, Shell, you're going to wait to make that bet. Yeah. You're going to wait till 6. You're going to wait till 6.5 because you've already been told what the line is going to go to when we get a firmer idea. And it could even go a little bit higher than that because, again, that line moved to 6.5 on rumor and early reports, not on confirmation that he's not going to play. So when confirmation comes, we're looking at 6 for sure, 6.5 probably, and maybe even some 7s, right? So when we're talking about how to bet this, that's what you want to wait for. Back to the football element, Gardner Minshew's involved. And you're right. He started a couple of games. And even if you go back to his time with Jacksonville, it's actually a pretty pleasantly surprising, if you will, look at his touchdown to interception ratio. There's a lot of touchdowns in there, and there's not that many interceptions. And again, that was with the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? So we just talked about them with regards to Trevor Lawrence and the Urban Meyer era, but it's not like it was any better before the Urban Meyer when it comes to like, functionality necessarily. Yeah, they made it to what? Was that a conference championship game they made it to one year? They had a decent organization, I suppose, at least from a coaching standpoint. But like, I'm not going to beat up Gardner Minshew for what happened when he was in the Jaguars organization, right?
Yeah.
And so I also trust the Eagles organization, because what do we know about the Eagles organization? They're super deep at every position, and they address stuff ASAP, right? Like Jordan Davis goes out and Fletcher Cox has to play too many snaps. And what do? They're immediately going to the streets for Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh. They have an issue in the secondary, immediate trade for Gardner Johnson from the Saints. Every single thing. Wide receivers weren't doing great last year. We're trading a first-round pick for A.J. Brown, right? We're out here making offers to teams. We are addressing things. And so if you're the Eagles, and by the way, last year when that season ended in that playoff game to the Buccaneers, people were calling for, well, first of all, anybody other than Jalen Hurts, but they were calling for Gardner Minshew in the second half of that Buccaneers game. Right? Like, we need somebody who can throw the ball. Like, Jalen Hurts can't throw the ball, and like, right? And yeah, he developed an obviously MVP candidate, and that's a whole other conversation about his candidacy and the odds that have moved there as well. But like, if you're the Eagles and all you do is address depth in every other position, and with all the quarterbacks that sort of move around in this league, you're content with Gardner Minshew as your backup quarterback, to me, that's an indication that Gardner Minshew's a pretty good option as a backup quarterback. Like, you don't need, to keep Joe Flacco around. I think he had a cup of coffee in sort of a backup role with the Eagles. Like, you don't need some of these other guys that have kind of been rotated through that organization. They're like, yeah, you know what? Gardner Minshew's good enough to be a backup quarterback. So all of that comes back to what are the Eagles with Gardner Minshew? And we go back to our good old-fashioned rating system, right? So, Shell, here we go. If you are rating the Eagles, and we already sort of have them in the high 60s out of 100 as a football team, right? In that spot where, like, it'd be nice if we saw them play some better teams on their schedule, but the ones they have played, obviously they have beaten, with the exception, obviously, of the Commanders, going 1-1 against them this year. So without Jalen Hurts, what would you rate the Eagles at out of 100, knowing that we're sort of coming from a place of like 67, 68, that sort of area?
I don't take them like into the 50s. I think they're still in the 60s, probably like maybe a 58. Like, I'm not taking them down that much is what I'm saying.
Perfect. So that's how I sort of feel about it. And I would be even a little bit more aggressive, even into the mid 50s, just because of a little bit of uncertainty. But you know what it takes to get them down to 6? And again, I'm using 6 because I think that's the number we go to when it's official that Gardner Minshew is the quarterback this week. The number's 49.
Okay.
So when this line goes up to 6, when Minshew is in, you have to understand that's telling you that the market or the odds makers or whomever is assigning basically a league average grade to the Eagles with Gardner Minshew for one single game. I don't have to sort of list you the teams that are in the league average, but it's the Lions. It is the Jaguars, ironically sort of coming back to them. The Commanders are sort of just under league average. Like these sorts of, the Vikings, right? Like these teams that, people honestly don't really think all that much of regardless of their record. And so I'm with you. I think they're close. It's a lot like the 49ers, speaking of, right? It's a very similar situation where you go, yeah, okay, a lot of people don't know that much or don't have that high regard for Brock Purdy, but he's filling in for a game or two, Purdy a little bit longer, but in theory, Minshew's filling in for a game or two in a system with a team with, again, a ton of talent around them. That's why the Eagles are good. That's why the 49ers are good. Obviously, the Eagles have a little more going on with the quarterback position as far as doing extra stuff, short yardage, red zone, all of those sort of danger type elements that they bring to the table against an opponent. But I can't, like I said, same as you, I can't get to 6 here. I mean, that would upgrade the Cowboys a lot because obviously it's a two-way street. But what are we upgrading the Cowboys off of? Shell, you and I pegged it last week where we're like, what are we getting excited about the Cowboys rating kept going up because they would pull away from the Giants and the Colts in the fourth quarter, despite that being a close game in the third quarter. And then they almost lost to the Texans. And people are like, just don't seem to care about that. And then so we're like, yeah, okay, we'll take the Jags money line. We'll swoop in. We'll grab a little value with the Jags money line this week. And it goes and it cashes. Now, listen, that game could have gone either way. But the point is, like, why are we upgrading the Cowboys? Why are we keeping the Cowboys at the rating that they are? Because honestly, the defense isn't as good as people think that it is because of how good it was at the start of the season. It has fallen off against some crappy teams. We talked about the quarterbacks of those teams. And then, of course, we had Trevor Lawrence dicing them up largely last week. Can Gardner Minshew do that? I think he can. I think it's a very interesting spot where we can get some value on Philadelphia here. It's by far the most interesting game, which is why we've gone so long on it. But but we want to wait. 4.5 is not the bet. 4.5 is honestly the point spread it should be. And I think that sort of gives people a decent understanding, right? If the point spread should be 4 and we see it go back to 6.5, that's where we strike.
Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense. Lots going on there. Lots of information to keep up with as we get closer and closer to Saturday's action. And yes, Saturday's action, which also happens to be Christmas Eve, a full slate of games as we continue here on the pod to our next game, which is the Seahawks at the Chiefs. Chiefs are 10-point favorites. And I know the Chiefs are one of the worst teams against the spread in the entire NFL. And also, if you look at my record, it's probably a lot of my losses are Chiefs, me taking the Chiefs blindly each and every week against the spread. I get it. I understand that. But I'll be honest with you. This one here, I'm on the Seahawks, but the reason more so is because of the number of 10, right? Just the value of that number at 10. Yes, are the Chiefs always overvalued? Probably. Were they lucky to win last week against the Texans? I'll say that again. The Texans, I saw that score pop up on my phone. I was kind of like, wait, what's happening here? Anyways, 10, too many points, too valuable of a number. I cannot take the Chiefs here. I am on the Seahawks to cover the 10 points.
So it is, it's so funny, right? Like the weekly Chiefs conversation. And like you said, like the amount of losses in that column that are Chiefs related. And now for you to jump off that when I think this is actually a really good week for the Chiefs.
Chiefs at home. Chiefs kind of like, we got to stop messing around.
I think we get caught up sometimes in assigning an attitude to teams, and I'm as guilty of that. And I sort of was kicking myself last week on the idea that like, oh, a bunch of these teams are dead and like da da da. And it's like every year, come late December, we find out that like there's a bunch of teams that should be dead, but they're professionals and they actually like try, because you can't not try in an NFL football game or like you might get killed. Here's the situation. Okay. From a line perspective, I'll put it this way. I have this at 11.
Okay.
From a market standpoint, right? So like previous point spreads, I have this in my own self as 10.5 and this opened 9.5. So It's on the way to where I had the number, which means there's obviously been Chiefs interest at minus 9.5. Now I understand once you hit 10, we talked about this last week with a couple of different games. One of them being the Eagles game. Like once you hit 10, that starts to become interesting. So I can see why you'd sort of want to play the Seahawks there. But to me, it's a little concerning that we went from 9.5 to 10 because that did feel like kind of a big number for a team that basically, I'm going to say never, which is obviously an exaggeration, but a team in the Chiefs that never covers the spread. Problem is, we just had the Chiefs off of 3 straight road games, I believe, which is a type of thing that is going to kind of hurt your perception of them, right? And so if you were making excuses for why that game was close last week against the Texans, one of the excuses would be like, yeah, you know what? Maybe it's because they've been on the road for, basically the better part of a month. Obviously not literally because they fly back home, but you know what I mean? And so once you sort of play sort of below your standard, right? Still within your range, but, because they were winning all these games by and large, except for the Bengals game, of course. We sort of we slowly knock them down. We don't ever take them. Like if we had them at 75, for example, out of 100, we don't ever take them from 75 down to 70 because they had some poor performance, but we take them from 75 to 74, and then they lose to the Bengals, so they go down to like 72, not a drastic move, and then it's really close against the Texans, and you're like, that's kind of embarrassing, so you knock them down to like 71 or 70, and that's how you find them at opening at 9.5 against a Seahawks team that, by the way, obviously struggling. Like they've lost 4 out of their last 5, kind of took a dagger when it came to like the NFC West, like as if they were ever going to win the NFC West. Comical that anybody thought that was going to be the case, but especially looking at the 49ers talent level, but like, took that dagger on Thursday. And again, doesn't mean they're going to quit, but like Kenneth Walker, sort of banged up, and obviously doesn't look like Tyler Lockett's going to play in this game, as he broke a finger or something along those lines. And honestly, the Geno thing has sort of kind of come down a little bit here, and there's obviously a pretty massive vulnerability from a defensive standpoint with the Seahawks. And so, and again, not, as much as we kind of give Pete Carroll credit, very much a motivational type guy, kind of the Mike Tomlin of the West, if you will, where like guys will buy in, but we're not totally positive. Like Carroll knows exactly what he's doing from a game management standpoint. And so I just look at it and I go, yeah, I think this kind of team is realizing that their talent level is like some of these other teams, some in a positive way, some in a negative way, in this case, a negative way, kind of who we thought they were. Right. And not to the tune of like a 3-14 type of team, but to the tune of like not a playoff team. And so now they're going on the road, kind of shooting their shot, if you will, at home to a team that hasn't played at home in a little while, that if they want to, with the McKinnon, the Pachecos of the world, I'm seeing the card is out, the wireless mouse. I think this is kind of a problematic spot for the Seahawks. I didn't get it at 9.5. I'm hoping the 9.5 comes back. At 10, I would still do it because, again, let's look at it logically, right? Like if it lands on 10, it's just a push. I didn't lose any money on it. Yeah. So, I just would rather 9.5 so I get a win on 10, but I don't even know if it's going to matter all that much. I think this might be blowout town for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, surprise, surprise. It doesn't take much to talk me into taking the Chiefs to cover big points. So the pick has been switched. First one of the week, Kansas City -10 against the Seahawks. Let's keep the show moving. We go to the Giants at the Vikings. The Vikings are laying 4 points at home, another Vegas zone special. The Vikings could be the strangest 11-3 team in NFL history. I have no idea why they needed to fall behind by 30 plus points. Epic comeback versus the Colts and Jeff Saturday, which story for a little later on in the pod. Anyways, my question to you, as I am on the Vikings -4, my question to you with this Vegas zone game, how is it possible that the Giants were 4.5-point underdogs against the Commandos and are now 4-point underdogs against the Vikings at home?
I feel like
that is my question to you.
I feel like a proud father right now. You're right, man. Like that's such a great point. That's a perfect point for all of this, right? Like, I guess because the Giants won last week, or by the way, like the Vikings are capable of going down 33-0 to a team at halftime. All of these things are fair. Market number, right? It's where we kind of try to start as much as we possibly can here. 5.3 -5, basically -5.5 is where this line theoretically should be, right? But like the Vikings get downgraded. Yeah, congrats on the comeback, but they get downgraded for needing the greatest comeback in the history of the NFL. Can't believe the Colts didn't win that game outright for those who didn't have the early payout in the round robin money line parlay.
Oh, something I got to add here. The most insane thing I've done. No, I can't say that because I've been on a crazy run fading the Raptors the last week, which is a story for another day, which I can't. Anyways, I'm going to just stop talking about that. But what I will say, including in this run here of some great gambling, the Vikings to come back in the second half, I parlayed the Vikings money line with the Justin Jefferson anytime touchdown and guess who? Dalvin Cook anytime touchdown.
Oh my God.
That might have been like the most epic, just Steph Curry half court 3 ever.
What were the odds on that?
It was like +4 something, I think. I gotta check. Let me check. Let me look it up.
4,000? Like
no. It wasn't as crazy as you would have thought, right? Not as crazy. So it wasn't at half.
At half.
I don't think it was at 30 yet. but it was like in the 20s. It was like 20-0 or something. Like it wasn't
okay. So like
full,
before halftime.
Yeah. It wasn't the full on like 33-0. Okay, I'm gonna make this bet.
Gotcha.
I want to say, hold on, let me look it up.
Well, I'll talk about this game. I'll talk about this game while you look that up. And you like, listen, you guys know we've been fading the Vikings. Speaking of things that made me furious, right? Like going back to the Jets-Vikings game, watching the Jets sneak in the touchdown against the Lions there, the go-ahead, what I was hoping was going to be the winning touchdown last week. A week or two after they refused to sneak it against the Vikings. I'm laughing, but it's the only thing that's stopping me from crying. As you know, like we've been fading the Vikings, so I'm lower. I've been trying to stay lower than the market on my rating in the same way that I've been trying to stay higher on the Jaguars, for example, in the market. And whereas the Giants are kind of a trickier one where, again, probably going to make the playoffs. I think they're minus 700 right now to make the playoffs. I think they're up to 8 wins here. But again, the market still just kind of goes like, shoulder shrug on them. So I think we have a pretty stable idea of where we should have the Giants rated. And even then, I only get to 5.5 on this game. And so this got to 3.5. And the greedy ones, i.e. myself, were sitting around like hoping we actually saw a 3 on Minnesota. And obviously that never happened. The 3.5s got gobbled up. But now we're sitting here at 4. Still a little bit of value here on the Vikings. That win for the Giants was so big. Again, they're minus 700. They're not minus 700 to make the playoffs because they're expected to win this game, right? So they don't necessarily need to win this game. That's how big that sort of dividing line type of a game was with the Commanders, right? Once they tied the Commanders in that first game, the second game was going to kind of almost be worth 2. It's kind of like a skins game rollover type thing for our golfers out there. So they win that game, and especially on the road, obviously. Now they're in the driver's seat with all these other sort of teams kind of falling by the wayside. Again, would it be nice for the Giants to win this game? Absolutely. But the Vikings, you see when it is looking good, what it can look like, right? In that second half, where Dalvin is doing Dalvin things, and Justin Jefferson's obviously doing Justin Jefferson things, and of course Thielen is reliable, on some of these high leverage plays, particularly near the goal line. So the Giants just aren't the team that necessarily takes advantage of the bad defense of another team in the same way, honestly, that the Colts aren't really that type of team. The Colts took advantage of punt blocks and 4th and 1s from their own, territory that failed, and all of those sorts of things. They didn't get burned by Matt Ryan.
Punters trying to throw.
Yeah, exactly. Going for fake punts. Like, you forget all of the insane stuff that happened in the first half of that game to get to that lead. So you never love laying points with the Vikings, like, period, but like it's more the 6s and the 7s, and against honestly teams in the Colts that, again, this is with healthy Jonathan Taylor, whether it was before the season or just last week, like I have the Colts rated higher than the Giants.
Yeah.
And that's not just me, right? That's the market as well, which, by the way, is why that game closed 3.5 and this game is 4, to go back to your sort of comparison, right? The market kind of has the Giants about a half point worse than a relatively healthy, with Jonathan Taylor version of the Colts.
Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense. I found the bet. It was a plus 400 is what that number ended up being, which to me was a telltale sign that we were all very confident that Jeff Saturday could go Jeff Saturday and blow that game.
Something was going to go down.
Something was going to go down indeed. Let's keep it moving here with the Commandos at the Niners. Niners at home, favored by 7 points. A Brock Purdy era is here. And I've enjoyed the trolling because it's not that I think that Brock Purdy is amazing. I just think that he's decent, and he just proves that Jimmy Garoppolo was just a guy. That's just my own personal vendetta against Jimmy Garoppolo and the pain and suffering of watching Jimmy Garoppolo in the playoffs and not being able to breathe. Right. But anyways, should the Niners be laying 7 points at home against anybody? I understand it's a lot of points. I get it. And I'm pausing here, but I'm going to take the 7 and take the push if it is just by a touchdown. Not confident in it. I'm going to lay the 7 points. And I'm just kind of amazed. Like when you stop and think about a team that has lost 2 starting quarterbacks and now Debo's out for a nice run here. Credit where credit's due. I got to tip my cap to Shanahan, who I crush here and there, but Give me the Niners laying the 7 points.
Yeah, I think your first point was, sort of the jumping off point for discussion on this game, right? Is like, it's not necessarily the 49ers should they be laying this number of points? It's Kyle Shanahan. It's always Kyle Shanahan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I tweeted last Thursday, watching Kyle Shanahan make three of the dumbest in-game decisions, right? Mm-hmm. They got the Seahawks to jump off sides on 4th and 7 at the end of a quarter, even though no one on the planet thought that they were going to snap the ball, except for the defensive end on the Seahawks who jumps offside. And they get him to jump offside so that they get 4th and 2 from I think it was the 38, 37 yard line, something along those lines. You're gashing the Seahawks for 6 yards of carry on the ground. And they go to commercial because it's obviously the end of the quarter, and they come back and the 49ers are lining up to punt.
I was very confused.
I mean, you'd be confused if we hadn't lived through Kyle Shanahan for the last however many years he's been coaching this team. Uber conservative dude, right? Oh yeah, we can beat this team. We know we can beat this team, but let's not try to win by margin here. Let's just kind of beat this into the ground over a period of time. He took a timeout when the clock was running down on the 1 yard line because I guess he didn't want to suffer the half-yard line penalty that a false start would take. He's challenging 3-yard gains that yeah, man, maybe you get this correct. And instead of it being 3rd and 9, it's 3rd and 6 or vice versa. But what are we doing just getting willy-nilly with these timeouts out here? Come on. So again, all that is to say, it's still Kyle Shanahan and still his conservative style and the idea that we need them to win by 2 scores from an on-field standpoint. Here's my thing. I'm a card-carrying member. I literally driving the bus, driving the wagon, the bandwagon, told you to hop up on the front seat and we'll collect people on the way for Brock Purdy not being a massive downgrade for the 49ers, right? So I'm higher than the market, have been for, certainly in that first game against the Buccaneers. Last week, do you remember how he started that game? Do you remember the stat?
No.
Yeah, so he was 11 for 11.
Okay.
To start the game.
Mm-hmm.
He finished the game, it was something along the lines of 16 for 26, something along those lines. So that means he started the game 11 for 11, but he finished the game 5 of 15.
The script was good. You're all over it, right? And the script is great. The Kittle, 2 pump fakes on one play. Oh, I was loving it. I was on the Kittle anytime touchdown. I'm
people
sorry.
Running. You got that from the score, I'm sure. People are running through the streets just excited about 2 pump fakes on one play that sprung Kittle over the middle. And kudos to them for drawing that up, for that somehow working to the effect that it did, and all as you mentioned, the script and et cetera, et cetera. And then obviously some of those plays came after the first 15 script because I don't think they were 11 and 4 from a run-pass ratio or pass-run ratio. But at the same time, things got a little dicey in the second half, and honestly got a little dicey in the second quarter when he hit my guy, Pro Bowl safety right in the hands with an interception that could have maybe gone back to the house, or at the very least kind of been returned for 10 yards into field goal range. What happens? He doesn't intercept it. They punt it down. For some reason, Travis Homer is involved in our lives, and he fumbles the ball despite knowing that he's about to get hit. And that obviously turns the game because, by the way, one of the scoring drives that Brock Purdy led was about 5 yards long, right? Yeah. So outside of that kind of turn of events, and seeing the fact that even the Seattle Seahawks defense kind of tightened things up to the point where Purdy was inaccurate in the second half, has me just a little bit more concerned. And when I say a little bit more concerned, I just mean 7 points versus maybe if this was 6.5 points type more concerned. By the way, should circle back. My number in this game is exactly the same as what I believe the market rating to be for this game, and that's 5.5.
Yeah.
So the Commanders lose that game, but I don't think it's quit on the season type deal because I think they can get back in the playoffs here. They might be getting Chase Young back in this game. Now, who knows how many snaps he plays? I don't even know that I want Chase Young playing a full complement of snaps. I think I just want him out there on 3rd and long to get to the passer. That's not something that the 49ers allowed to the Buccaneers or to the Seahawks, but the Washington front is better than those two fronts, certainly at this point in time. Again, a little bit concerned with how maybe we've not gone too far necessarily with Purdy, but nobody's talking about the second part of that game. A second game without Debo, right? Didn't necessarily matter because you just gave it to Christian McCaffrey a billion times against the Seahawks' bad run defense. But the Seahawks front four, again, not as good as the Washington front four that even though they lost that game against the Giants, right, held up pretty well against Saquon Barkley right up until that last drive where Barkley was ripping off some chunks of yardage there. But again, we're talking about climbing the mountain here and surpassing two scores or one score into a 2-score game here at -7. At +7, there may be even some +7.5s with like reduced juice here, a little plus. I think I saw a -117 for a +7.5 on the Commanders. That's where I'm playing this. And honestly, based on kind of the idea, we had a t-shirt and hat game last week. What does that mean? It means you won the division. You get the t-shirt and the hat after the game. Really big win for the 49ers. This just does not rate for them. We talk about like motivations and stuff, and like the difference between being the third and the second seed. Like that's not, that means something, but it's not necessarily something to get fired up about and blow a team out that is, again, fighting for their own lives. Give me this. I'm getting some value here. I think I have an okay handicap on this game, even though Taylor Heineke kind of freaks me out against a really good 49ers defense. But again, we're getting 7 points here, so we have a little room to work with regard to, maybe a miscue potentially. And honestly, listen, the Seahawks, almost covered that number last week if it wasn't for, one bad play there. So yeah, I'm on the Commanders here +7. And again, haven't bet it. Actually, I have bet it, but I will bet it again if we can see some +7.5s here at a respectable price.
No, I got you. Makes a lot of sense there. I'm just rolling with my Niners here and kind of just riding the Purdy train until I got to actually take a pause when the big boy games matter in a few weeks. But we got the Bengals at the Patriots. Bengals 3-point faves on the road. I will be on the Bengals here. I'll take the push if they win by a field goal, but I kind of think Bengals roll here. But beyond that might just be because I'm blinded by what I will say is the dumbest loss I've ever seen in my life. I watched that play over and over again, how that Patriots game ended, and I just didn't understand what was happening. It's like the only plausible explanation could have been that Jacoby Myers has some like illicit photos that somehow Josh McDaniels got a hold of and was like blackmailing him to win that game, because that didn't make any sense to me. I have no idea how that happens. But I did feel bad watching the Jacoby Myers post-game presser because my guy looked sad, as he should. With all that said, get out of here, Patriots. I don't know. I feel bad saying that because the years and years of riding in Belichick land and just trusting Belichick.
Yeah.
Oof. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think for that.
I think that's over with. I think this, but you still have to have like an accurate or sort of reasonable rating for a team.
I know.
You know what I mean? Like, so as much as I want to go like, no, Patriots are idiots. They'll never win another game. Get out of my life. And it's like, yeah, but that's why we have this rating system, because I have to go back to it and go, okay, but for real though, what are we making the Patriots, right? Are we, if we had been sitting around going like, yep, better than average team, Belichick's getting everything, all the BS cliches, and we had them rated at like 55 or 52 or whatever, right? Which honestly, some of the weeks, that's where the market rating has been. Now, if we're going to like dip them into like a below average team or sort of way below average team, like if you can make that change to the rating and sort of sleep at night, like more power to you. So I think I have them rated like pretty sort of negatively. I have it 45. My 45 comes to a 2.5 for the Bengals here. And that's giving the Bengals even a little bit of a bump. Now, I say that I give them a little bit of a bump. But again, you said you were out last week, so I won't put this to you, but I'll put this to the listener. Like, if you watch that game against the Buccaneers, what percentage of that game are you giving credit to the Buccaneers, giving credit to the Bengals and giving discredit to the Buccaneers? Because like we use a lot of like words to describe things that happen. And one of those words is implode. Like, oh, this team imploded and they imploded. But like what is an implosion, right? Like we see these stadiums and these big buildings, like getting, the camera gets set up like a mile away and we watch the dynamite go off and it literally like implodes and like dust comes flying up. That was like watching the Buccaneers in that third quarter. Like forget about the chaos from Jacoby Myers at the end there, because listen, we can make the case your boy was out of bounds in the first place. So I don't think we should have even been in that position. And B, when it comes to Myers, listen, Shell, I don't know if you had that buddy when you were a kid. Maybe you were that buddy when you were a kid, and he's just like, "Yo, man, let's go to the convenience store. We're gonna go grab some junk food and hang out and blah blah blah." And then you look over, and your boy has got some M&Ms in his jacket. And he's got maybe sort of a magazine. I think we had an episode about loitering a couple of weeks ago. And all of a sudden he's sneaking out the door. And you're like, oh my God, are we just doing this? And maybe you throw your M&Ms into your jacket and you're like scooting out of there. Because I kind of think that's what happened to Jacoby Myers when Ramondre Stevenson, started lateraling him. And Myers might have been going into that play, kind of like sauntering down the field. Like, I guess we're just running the clock out. And then all of a sudden, like when lateral, pitchy woo woo, shout out Scott Van Pelt, like that starts going down. He might be, oh, are we doing this? And he's got the M&Ms in his jacket and he's running backwards, away from, we all thought we were getting chased by the cops when we were 12. Like, and he's just hucking it backwards. Like, we need to do this. Like I guess we are doing this. I guess we're not tied. I guess, maybe I missed a 2-point conversion from the Raiders or something. Like, but, he kind of, honestly, just flat out panicked, right? I think, if you sat there and asked him, what do you do in this situation in like a, classroom type style thing, I think he'd have the correct answer. My guy just freaked out. The Buccaneers systematically imploded with everybody and everyone screwing stuff up, right? Pass protection. Brady couldn't hand the ball off. We're snapping the ball into the face of Gio Bernard on a punt. That was it a fake? Was it not a fake? Why would you ever have a fake punt when Tom Brady is on your team? Like, how many times do we see the Patriots fake a punt in the 20 years that Tom Brady was there? Like, all of these different things that happened, right? And it was like, just try to play the Bengals when they have to have the ball at their own 25 instead of your 25. It was infuriating as somebody who had Buccaneers plus 3.5 up 17 points in the first half. And Joe Burrow and the Bengals couldn't move the ball down the field. It was like they put in a request for the Buccaneers that like 75 yards was too far for them to go. And if you wouldn't mind, could we play from 25 yards out like it was a college football overtime for the rest of the game? And the Buccaneers, Todd Bowles is just a dope, is just signing away. Like, yeah, let's try it. We're up 17 points. Might as well see how many times you can get the ball at our 25 and see how that goes. Guess what? Didn't go all that great. So the point is like, I can even bump the Bengals up for no real reason other than like they've just cover all the time. They're the reverse Chiefs. And I can knock the Patriots down because of one guy panicking because apparently we're shoplifting. And I still don't get to 3.5, which is the number it was on open and early on this week. And now it's moved to 3. And so I've seen people that sort of not as sharp necessarily, kind of guessing these lines and all of that sort of thing, go, oh, 3.5 for the Bengals? Like, that's way too low. And the thing is, they said the same thing against Tampa Bay last week. And then they found themselves down 17-0, and the Bengals couldn't move the ball. The problem is they got away with it last week. And that's the frustrating part about this whole racket, is not only do we have guys lateraling the ball all over town for no real reason, but we also have bad bets that have no sort of thought process or sort of formula behind them getting paid off. And that happens every week. That's not, it's not new by any stretch of the imagination. But just know that this line was Cincinnati minus 3.5. And somebody thought enough of the Patriots, even despite the disaster from last week, to grab that 3.5. Now, am I saying, oh, you got to grab plus 3 here? No, not necessarily. You're obviously in a sort of different territory here. But if the game lands 3, it's going to be a push. I just think it needs to be, people need to be aware that this was 3.5, and the Patriots are the team that took enough money, sharp, influential money, right? This isn't $10 at a time here, on the Patriots to move it this early in the week. Now, maybe that's a head fake, because a lot of times you'll see guys who really want to bet the Bengals at minus 3, put a bunch of money on the Patriots at plus 3.5, knowing that their money is influential and can get that number down to 3, at which point they will bet way, way more on the Bengals when the limits go up, i.e. on Thursday. So let's wait and see, right? If this line goes back to 3.5, you'll know that that might have been a bit of a head fake there to get a Bengals -3 price. If it doesn't, and this number gets closer to the 2.5, or, sort of stays at 3, hard to imagine it goes through 3 and goes to 2.5. But if it stays at 3, I think that's an indication that like the Patriots are probably the team that we're supposed to be betting on here.
Okay. I like it. From the Bengals, we go to the Bills. The Bills are on the road, and they are 9-point favorites in Chicago. It's a lot of points. The Bills against a bad team. Their offense just kind of seems to roll. I know this game, it'll be interesting because the Bills kind of still want to win, right? Like they still need to win as, the chase for the top seed in the AFC definitely really, 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 really matters.
Yeah.
So, and really what's 9 points? I mean, if they win 20-10, that's a cover, right? Anyways, Josh Allen, beast mode last week. All that's great. Give me this is pretty simple for me, really, to be honest. Bills -9. The Bears, good job, good effort. See you next year.
My ratings come to 9, so I'm totally okay with it. The market ratings that I have here, come to 10, maybe even some pretty close to 11 here. Like a 10.9, which seems really high for a team on the road. But I mean, listen, the Eagles were 9. They kind of dipped down to 8.5 last week, but they were 9 for much of the week last week. And the market has pretty much all season long had the Bills rated higher than the Eagles. Now, I was watching that game on Saturday night, and I'm just sitting there, again, needing the Bills. Certainly needed them to win outright. Thankfully, they started a bunch of teasers that were really profitable last week and led to a pretty big week for me, even though the against the spread stuff wasn't all that great. I think we're 4-3-1 against the spread. And I'm just watching this Bills game, and I'm like, this team, it's just something's missing. Why am I underwhelmed every time I watch the Bills, right? The offense just isn't, they have these flashes of 3-play touchdowns, 75-yard touchdown drives. And then it's just no, actually, Josh Allen just skipped a ball, whizzed one by Stephon Diggs's ear, or we're using a series of running backs that aren't necessarily doing all that much. And the defense comes out there and Mostert's just, going to town on them, right? At any given moment, it seems like he could bust a 60-yard run. And so I don't really want to lay a ton of points on the road here against this Bears team that we just watched last week. Frisky enough that if they're down 14 or down 16 or something, you know what I mean? That they're not done yet, right? There's always kind of something left in the old bag there for Justin Fields, who is just absolutely electric. There should be one, maybe not once a game, maybe once a season, where we all get to vote on a play that even though a guy stepped out of bounds barely, the play should still count. That was a Justin Fields run for me last week, where we should have all been able to, hit something on our phone and called that a touchdown. I hate this game. It's not going to be a game that I'm dying to bet on. This might be the sort of same deal that you had with the Chiefs, really, where it's if we'll go to 10, because again, the market rating often kind of creeps towards that number. I mean, we just talked about it with Cincinnati and New England in a different type of a way. If this gets up to 10, then I think I'll be on the Bears.
I got you. Makes a lot of sense. For sure. Speaking of not making a lot of sense, two teams that have been really up and down, especially just lately with what the Lions are doing right here. Yeah. How are people buying into the Lions right now? But it's a thing. And I'm one of those people. Lions favored by 2.5 points in Carolina against the Panthers. I don't like the Lions as road favorites. I don't like laying points with the Lions as road favorites. But I'm going to plug my nose, trust them that they can win by a field goal and continue this run. They've won, 6 of their last 7 games. I mean, speaking of the conversation we were just having, if this moves to 3, I'm more likely to take a pause. 3.5. Okay, cool. But at 2.5, oof, I'm plugging my nose, taking the Lions. I don't love it, but I'm trusting the process here with your man's Dan Campbell and what they got going there.
Yeah, speaking of Dan Campbell, and I hate doing this because, listen, my job is to write about bets that's what I do basically all the time. Sometimes you can't write about every single bet that you ever make, especially when it's 150 to 1. And that's what I did with Dan Campbell 2 weeks ago. I bet on Dan Campbell to win Coach of the Year at 150 to 1. He's now at plus 175 2 weeks. And all it took was a win against the Vikings at home where they were the favorite, which was kind of the reason why I made the bet. Because I was like, well, if they're going to win this week, then, he's going to get some attention here. And then they pull off the game that we mentioned before when it took them basically, 57, 58 minutes, something along those lines, to get a touchdown offensively. This Lions offense that we're all sort of, supposed to be very excited about. Mm-hmm. I still think the Panthers defense is pretty good. I think they probably got a little too, let's use an old-timey term here, big for their britches after the road win in Seattle the previous week. We saw the market kind of react to them, where that game probably should have been a pick-em against the Steelers. We had the Trubisky element in there that sort of pushed that line close to and even touched a field goal against the Steelers last week. And then, of course, all Trubisky had to do was just hand the ball off. And Najee Harris was having a really great game. And by the way, the Steelers' run defense was very good in that game. Mm-hmm. And that's what the Panthers want to do, right? They want to, whether it's Hubbard, whether it's Foreman, they just want to pound the ball over and over and over again. And when they can't, and when they get behind because the Steelers, in this case, scored the first touchdown, the Panthers are just not going to be able to compete. But if they get the first touchdown, they get, a 10, 17-point lead. Now you're in really big trouble when it comes to the Panthers. Mm-hmm. So in order for the Lions to kind of win this game and cover this game, they're going to need a hot start. That's not really what Jared Goff does in these outdoor game type situations, right? Like they didn't get the hot start against Chicago. They didn't get the hot start against the Giants. They didn't get the hot start last week they actually got a hot start because of the punt return. And listen, that was a short punt return that might have ended up in a field goal anyway, right? So it's, let's not take the 7 points off the board necessarily, but maybe there was kind of 4 extra points on that touchdown. So to me, this is almost one where you actually leave it and just kind of see who scores first. Yeah. And then kind of play it off of that. But I think it's worth mentioning, along the same lines of Bengals and Patriots, the line was 3. And so, if your instinct is, the Panthers at +3, like that would be something I would have to think about. Keep in mind, like other people saw that and jumped on it. So your instinct was correct. You just sort of didn't get to the store in time. Right. Yeah. As we get into sort of, up here in Canada, Boxing Day sales and these, sort of after holiday shopping deals, right? People were kicking each other and knocking down the door to grab Panthers +3. Right. And so that moved it off of 3 down to this 2.5, which is obviously much less valuable. So that just needs to be sort of in the mind that like +3 was a really good, somebody out there thought +3 was a really, really good bet on the Panthers. Obviously, I think we're at the point here in week 16 where it doesn't need to be mentioned. But a home team, 2.5-point underdogs. What does that mean? That means teaser time. Let's get that thing up to 8.5 and force the Lions to win by margin here on another game on the road. Listen, it's Carolina. It's not going to be the coldest day of their lives, but certainly still December type weather, anywhere basically in the country outside of like Florida at this point.
Speaking of, we head to Cleveland. We got the Saints at the Browns. Browns favored by 2.5 points. Browns offense still looking kind of suspect, I'll say. Only putting up 13 points versus the Ravens. But I know there's a lot going on. The QB I still won't name is still, trying to figure out his way there. I got to be honest with you. This might be exactly what we were just talking about, where I really wanted to take the Saints in this game. Like really, really, really want to take the Saints in this game. But with it being under a field goal, that's why I'm on the Browns here. That's it. So I can be easily persuaded in this game. But I just think that the way that at some point, I feel like the Browns offense will be the offense that most people are anticipating when you sign a dude for the highest contract ever, right? Like you hope that at some point they figure it out. But I don't know. I'm on the Browns, not really liking it, -2.5.
So a couple of things. First of all, because everybody loves a fantasy football story. So my initial inclination, because I do what I do, is when Jalen Hurts gets injured, I go, okay, what are the betting ramifications, right? First things first, how does that change the line for the Cowboys game? Second thing, how does that change the odds in the MVP? Third thing, how does that change for other, Eagles related futures? And then, fourth and final thing, how does that affect the schedule for all these other teams? We talked about the Jags before. About 3 hours later, I'm thinking to myself, there's something else that I'm missing in all of this. And then I realize Jalen Hurts is my fantasy football quarterback, the guy who I waited out everyone in my auction to have enough money so that I could outbid anybody who dared try to take Jalen Hurts away from me, the cornerstone of the entire season. I go, oh God, what am I going to do? Well, the quarterback that I had stashed on my bench the entire season, just for, in theory, this type of scenario, your man's Deshaun Watson.
Definitely not my man's, for the record.
I was waiting for that. And then we go and we take a look at the old odds board here to check out this game. And it isn't about the spread. It's about the total. This total is 31.5 in this game. And you go, what? Like, Saints offense isn't that bad, and the Bears offense isn't that bad. Well, how about like 50 to 70 mile an hour winds for you?
Yeah.
So, I talk about this in a fantasy football context because now I'm sitting here going like, well, do I want Deshaun Watson to be my starting quarterback in a semifinal in, gale force, borderline hurricane level winds? Or do I want like literally anyone else I can possibly find? Long story short, Gardner Minshew is getting the start for the Vinegar Strokes this week.
Yeah.
What could possibly go wrong? But as it pertains to this game, the wind, the total obviously being borderline historically low. Is it going to get lower? Is it going to go down to like 30? Are we going to see it in 29.5? That has to be an historic low. All that is to say, when it's that windy and scoring is so hard to come by, every single point matters, right? And the kicking gets affected. And so all right, are we doing field goals? Maybe not. Are we doing long extra points? Maybe not. Well, if we're not even bothering with extra points, we start getting into 2-point conversion town, and we start getting into scoreagami, like really weird score type territory, which again means that 1 and 2 become a lot more valuable and a lot more legitimate sort of finish scores, because you're not looking to kick an extra point, the 35-yard extra point. Let's say the game is somehow they get to 17-10. Somebody scores a touchdown. You're going to be a lot more likely to just go for the 2-point conversion one way or another, right? Like there could be 2-point conversions from Jump Street in this game. Honestly, then neither team might score. We might be just doing 0-0s in this game. Like, you know what I mean? When we're hitting these levels of wins and everybody just runs the football, and it's not just everybody runs the football and we're not sure whether they're going to throw. If everybody runs the football and we know they're going to run the football, it's going to be really hard to create some offense in this.
Yeah.
Game.
No, for sure.
We're hitting a lot of these games that the old number was something and now it's something else. So like the Saints +3, I think, was an attractive bet to people because of the possibility of the Browns winning this by 1 or 2 points being higher than it would normally be, right? Because normally we look at a 2.5-er here and we go, oh, it's just a field goal. You can go to overtime and win by a field goal. Here, we're a little bit less likely to go to overtime because we're going to be scraping for 1s and 2s and any kind of points we can possibly get here. By the way, another really good teaser leg, right? Saints up to 8.5 in a game that, like I said, might be scoreless. Maybe this is that game where you hit the prop bet for no touchdowns scored at like whatever those go for, 50, 100 to 1, whatever those are, I don't know. Thing is, like, field goal kicking is going to be even harder than scoring touchdowns in a lot of ways, right? So like, we might get touchdowns, but just no kicks.
Well, will we get touchdowns in our next game, which is the Texans at the Titans? Titans are 4.5-point favorites. Another one, lovely sitting in the Vegas zone. Texans are getting points after back-to-back weeks in which they probably should have won outright versus the Cowboys and the Chiefs. Now you have the Titans, who've lost 4 in a row, This is just a weird game to me, like the perfect Vegas zone game. I would hope that I could be able to get more points with the Houston Texans here, but I'm on the Houston Texans with the 4.5 points in the Vegas zone. I want more points, but I'll settle for 4.5 points here with the Texans.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of things. So Texans, first of all, like, what do we do with the Texans rating, right? Like we had bombed them down like into subterranean territory below 20 for a minute there. I think we got to get them back up to like 22, something like that, somewhere we've had them for much of the year. The Titans rating with Tannehill sort of fresh, ready to go, is 47, right? Certainly not overrating them because this is a team that's leading their division. So it'd be hard for anybody to have an argument that that's too high. It might be too low. But again, if we're going to play that conservatively, the Tannehill number, all of that is to say, beep, boop, boop, this number should be 9.
Yeah.
But Tannehill's not going to play, I don't think. Possibility that he does, but this line opened at 7, which, right, feels like an in-between, not quite a Tannehill healthy, but not quite a Malik Willis line. It goes from 7 down to 4.5. Well, like the Eagles game, right, that's sort of an indication that we're already down to Malik Willis territory. Good news is we've got a Malik Willis rating because he's played 2 games this year, one of which, by the way, was against the Houston Texans. So I think we have a pretty good understanding of what Malik Willis is and how he relates to the Titans and what they are. And that rating, and part of that is sort of Vrabel game plan and being able to sort of like get sort of the most out of a kind of a bad situation. That rating goes from 47 down to about a 35, right? We're not a very good, not giving them a ton of credit, even though the 2 Malik Willis games was overtime against the Chiefs, or almost overtime. I can't remember whether that actually got to overtime, but last second field goal for the Chiefs. And then, of course, the win against the Texans. So, like, we can't really go much further down than that 35. So what does that spell out? That spells out 6 for the Titans, -6. We're going to have a -4.5 here. I'm not really sure what Malik Willis did in his stint, other than not being great throwing the football, but like he managed it around as far as like Derrick Henry running through the Texans for like 200 some odd yards when they first played. And Henry didn't even have that great a game against the Chiefs, right? They had enough game planning sort of around that and defensive ability to sort of, keep that thing close. So I don't know how we got necessarily down to -4.5. Like, that's kind of really a slap in the face to Malik Willis. Now, the Titans haven't played particularly well in these last few weeks, so you can sort of maybe make the case that we're kind of beating up on the Titans here for how they've played recently. But that's a field goal game against a really good, all of a sudden kind of really good Chargers team last week. So I'm not looking to downgrade the Titans beyond the sort of 2 different ratings that we have for them. There's no reason for me to sort of bounce backwards any more than what we've had for Malik Willis when he's played in these other 2 games. So I think this is actually a really good spot for the Titans to win one of these kind of, 16-6, like very similar to the last time they played. I don't expect this game to be a shootout. Now, again, somehow the Texans are getting things done here with the Driscoll Davis Mills, kitchen sink combo. I think that's the nickname for them, the kitchen sink combo. I think Driscoll and Mills are probably brands of some sort of like cake mixer or frying pan. I don't know. I'm just making that
Sounds about right.
Right? I mean, oh, yeah. What are you getting the wife this year for Christmas? She wants a new Driscoll, and we're gonna get some new Mills. We have to freshen up our plates, so we're gonna get some Mills plates, Davis Mills plates. So yeah, honestly, like I think we've kind of gone too far, and this number's too short for a Texans team. That like, kudos to them for them, fighting with the Cowboys and the Chiefs. The box score was a little uglier than the score was last week against the Chiefs. I just think, the Titans need to start getting some wins here, right?
Yeah.
Like this, this isn't a team playing. It kind of feels like the Titans are a team that's irrelevant and aren't playing, again, we have them rated below average, even kind of at the best of times, and that they are just playing out the string like some of these other teams. But it's like, no, actually they're leading the division and 1 game clear of Jacksonville. Like, they kind of need this game like desperately, and actually losing to a Texans team that, listen, you can make the case as much as they're fighting on the field. There are still some questionable decisions on whether they're actually trying to win these football games. So, I think we're just getting kind of a really cheap price here on the Titans, and I think we have to lay it at -4.5.
Okay. The Falcons at the Ravens. Ravens favored by 7.5 points. This line is very interesting to me. At last check, by the time we were recording this, Lamar hasn't practiced. But again, we're talking about Wednesday to Saturday. So There's still time. Either way, to me, 7.5 points is a lot of points for this Ravens offense. And if you're telling me that this is not Lamar and we're in Huntley land, it's definitely a lot of points to me. But
For sure.
Then we go into what's going on with the Falcons, which there's a lot going on with them as well, especially at the quarterback spot. Either way, give me the Falcons plus the 7.5 points, because that's just too much points for me to lay with the Ravens at this point of the season.
Yeah, so this is a Lamar line. Like, this is with the expectation that the Lamar plays, right? The Huntley line, again, extrapolating the previous games with Huntley into this line, this would be 5, right? Okay. Ravens by 5. Now, that's using the Huntley line going into those last 2 games. And you can very well look at those games from a box score standpoint or just with an eyeball standpoint and be like, not so great, right? And meanwhile, Devin Duvernay's got an injury. It doesn't look like he's going to play. So the other element is like, do they have enough guys, even if Lamar comes back, to get the ball to? Because by the way, when Lamar left, we were looking to downgrade the Ravens pretty significantly. Only like him leaving sort of staved off that, overreaction, if you will. And so with Lamar, based on those, previous numbers, the number is about 7.2. Right. So the Lamar number should be 7.2. It's 7.5. That probably has a lot to do with the fact that Desmond Ridder had his debut last week. And if we're being honest about it, he stunk. Now it was enough to cover a point spread, which is all we really asked for out of our guy last week. Shout out to Desmond Ridder. But a 50% completion rate and like 60 yards passing or whatever it was, like not exactly what we're looking for on the road against the Ravens. So am I dying to lay points with the Ravens here? Absolutely not. Am I thinking that there's a very good chance the Falcons do not score any points? And this has kind of, Broncos vibes from a couple of weeks ago. Now, listen, that game was 10-9, right? The Ravens couldn't score enough to cover a number, even though they only gave up like 9 points. All that is to say, I think this is another leg for Teaser Town. I think this is, we wait, if we not, part of the whole reason for doing this, making numbers and having power ratings in order to make numbers is to know what to expect from the line. So unlike Jalen Hurts and being in and out and where that line is going to go and knowing that it's going to swing one way or another, at least hypothesizing it's going to swing one way or another. This one, we know that the number right now is basically a full Lamar line. Like maybe it goes to a half point, to 8, something like that, because we start getting into like less important areas. So we can wait and see to make sure it's Lamar. And the worst thing that I think is going to happen is it maybe goes to 8.5, which is still teaserable, right? Down to under a field goal. So this is Ravens on a teaser. If you want to risk it now to go to -1.5, knowing it might be a Huntley situation, you can, but you can also sort of risk it in a different way, going like, I'd be fine if it was -8 down to -2 or -8 down to -2.5. You find out Lamar's in, you tease it down. We've already talked about some of these very good teaser options. Obviously, New Orleans plus 8.5, Carolina plus 8.5, and even some of these sort of touchdown favorites that you can knock down under a field goal, like this one.
Oh, yeah. I got you. Our next game on Saturday night, though, might be one of those opportunities here. You have the Raiders as 2.5 point underdogs in Pittsburgh. I will be on the Raiders plus the 2.5 points. The Raiders, they're after so many soul crushing losses this season, I guess at some point something had to bounce their way and them come out on top or be on the other side of a soul crushing play at the end of the game. But hey, here we are. The Steelers, on the other hand, have been playing really well. But in this spot, I just feel like this is a field goal game. And I know I'd been saying earlier on, I'd like it number to be at 3. And then I'd be able to take the underdog in this scenario. But I just like the Raiders. I'm not sure why. I can't believe even just uttering that sentence, I like stutter upon it. I like the Raiders. Not something I've said much at all this season. But 2.5 points with the Raiders. Give me that on a Sunday night primetime game against a Steelers team that's still kind of like, nah.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about obviously the breaks that they got. Again, I'm still more offended, honestly, by the call of it not being Cole being out of bounds, right?
Yeah.
Like those of you who are watching right now, right? You see this thing above me, right here, okay? You see how my head goes across it, and if you drew a line going across, right, it sort of disappears. That's what happened with that guy's foot, right? My head is out of bounds right now. So was that guy's foot. The line disappeared once we got to a foot and then reappeared on the other side. Anyway, don't want to get all the science of it all. This was +3. Now it's 2.5, right? A little bit of a theme to the sort of around a field goal type of thing, right? Bettors are grabbing +3s where they can get their hands on them. Some of them are +3.5s in the case of the Patriots. Some of them are +3s in the case of Panthers, Raiders. There was one other one that we just did.
Browns.
Thank you. We were in this case the Saints, right? They're grabbing the +3s wherever we can get them because honestly, a lot of these teams are all just kind of in this jumble of meh, right?
Yep.
Where like if there's a +3 out there, grab it because this thing's probably coming down to a field goal one way or another, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm certainly one of those who paid a little bit more, -115, even a -120 for the Raiders at +3. Certainly didn't think we were going to get anything better than that. Didn't think we were going to get a flat 3 here. Another one, low scoring total type of a game here. What do we do? +2.5. Up to +8.5, right? It's a teaser festival. And this is honestly probably the last week of teasers. I wrote about this week at the Score. This is probably the last week for teasers because once we get to week 17 and 18, you have these types of games where in theory the line should be 2.5, but I don't know whether one team cares or the other team cares.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Like these two teams care now because they still think they have a chance to make the playoffs. Week 17, the writing is on the wall. Week 18, the writing is definitely on the wall. And so you might have a pick'em game that everybody thinks is okay. I don't know which to pick with, blah, blah, blah. That might be 40-3 because one team cares and one team doesn't, right? So This is the last week to just teaser to your heart's content. And that's, I think, how we play this one. The Kenny Pickett, being back in, honestly, I don't know what to believe anymore. Trubisky's playing well, then he's not playing, and then he is, and then, Pickett's good, but sort of not. And, listen, Derek Carr and company, like it's just a mess.
There's a lot going on for sure. And there will be a lot going on this weekend as Christmas Day. We have a bunch of games on the sched, starting off with the Green Bay Packers at the Miami Dolphins. This game is nicely in the Vegas zone. Dolphins favored by 4. Vegas zone, Christmas in Miami. That's a lot of vibes there. I'm just saying. But give me the Packers and the points. I think the Dolphins win this game, but I don't want to take them laying more than a field goal in this game. I don't feel comfortable doing that. Meanwhile, the Packers, I know I'm not giving them too much credit because we know the state of the Rams, which we'll get to in a bit, but I feel like they at least look more presentable on offense, right? They look more serviceable on offense. And if that's it, you can at least run the ball. You still got Aaron Rodgers. I will take the 4 points and the Packers on the road in Miami.
Yeah, and right along lines with that, man. Top 5 offensive efficiency according to Football Outsiders DVOA, right, which is sort of an advanced metrics kind of go-to for a lot of people. Top 5 since week 10 for the Packers, right? Which eye test, makes some sense, right? They're actually hitting some of these deep passes, whether it was, Romeo Doubs and now obviously Christian Watson becoming this guy that defenses have to be aware of because they just released Sammy Watkins basically game day on Monday. And it's that was the guy who was kind of your best option for a minute there, and Lazard was out and all of that sort of thing. You see it's still not ideal. Aaron Rodgers is throwing signals out to guys and Watson has no idea what he's talking about. There was a story, I don't know if you caught it actually before the game earlier in the week that, they don't even write the signals down. You just are supposed to learn them from the guys around you because they don't want other teams to ever know what Rodgers signals are. And so if you're a rookie on this team, you're literally is there a playbook? There's a playbook, obviously, but is there is there a website, that I can go to for all of Rodgers' signals? And they're no, they're just sort of handed down your mom's cookie recipe for the holidays. And then sure enough, in that game, the total, people who bet totals are sweating it out because, they run that essentially one more play to run and to score a touchdown. and he's, sends the signal out, and Watson just does not understand it and never looks at the ball. So it's not exactly perfect just yet, but it's good enough. And I thought it would be good enough to lay the 7 points with the Packers, which at this point in the season, or honestly, maybe in the rest of my life with the NFL, I'm just loath to not do. Now, I've said it a couple of times, lay the points to Tennessee, lay them with Kansas City, et cetera, et cetera. But man, it's brutal in the NFL when guys are lateraling on interceptions a day after we saw Jacoby Myers lateral. You didn't watch any shows in the last 24 hours. I think it was Rasul Douglas. You haven't been paying any attention at all. Maybe tighten up the laterals for 1 week. So, I'm not dying to lay points, but I was okay with it with the Packers against the Rams. And as part of that, we talk about, especially going into Monday Night Football games, if you like a team really, if you really like a team on Monday, maybe look at their opponent next week. And if there's a line available for their game the next week, this line was 6, right? Going into that game on Monday. So I'm like, well, if I'm betting the Packers at -7 against the Rams, if I like them now, I should probably like them next week when they're getting 6 against the Dolphins. Yep. So I bet that. And I'm loving that because now it's down to 4. And that's around where my number should, has this line being. Actually, it's 4.5, right? So this is another slight over exaggeration because probably so much money came in on Green Bay +6, where you go, okay, well, we need to get some Miami money here back. But, you're moving this line, you're, susceptible to get middled here if you're a sports book. So, you can get into motivations and, obviously Dolphins kind of out of the division, obviously, from their loss last week. And they're still fighting for a wild card. And we talked about them being on the road for 3 straight games. A little bit different because I think that game last week kind of held firm their rating. Whereas obviously with the Chiefs, it kind of dropped down a little bit. Whereas the Dolphins, it dropped down for the first 2 games, but they got some credit for hanging in there and almost beating the Bills in those conditions. Now they get to go home for the first time in 3-4 weeks. So at this number at 4, no, it's not ideal, but I'll probably be using the Packers in a round robin underdog money line parlay because honestly, they've just been that much better over these last few weeks. Problem is, what does that mean? The Rams, the Bears, those victories, it's been Bears by Rams after the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So how much of this is kind of artificial? So I can sit here and say I like my +6 because the market says +4 is the right number, but it's kind of hard for me to make a case at +4 that that's the right play unless I'm going all the way to Packers money line. They're going to run the table and potentially make the playoffs.
Yeah. No, for sure. Totally get it here. Totally get it. Let's keep it moving here. Broncos -2.5 at the Rams. And I can't lie, I will be watching basketball during this game on Christmas Day. Not even sure which one of the basketball games is on, but I guarantee you I will not be watching. Is it Ripon versus Baker Mayfield? Is that what this is going to be?
God, I think Russ is back, but I think the real issue here is the fact that the line doesn't change all that much between Russell Wilson and Brett Ripon.
I mean,
that's kind of a bummer if you're Russell Wilson, right?
And either way, Broncos -2.5. I'm on the Rams +2.5 here in this game. Sure, give me the points. I'll check in on the score. I'll check the ticker for the latest for our Canadian fans here. Yeah. I don't got much on this game. I feel bad for the NFL because this was their forte into stealing the headlines. Which they will. Let's not get it twisted. This will still beat the NBA in the ratings in the States. Totally. I'm just saying I will not be one of the people watching this game.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ripon number is Pick'em. Russell Wilson number is 2. Rams with we had to upgrade the Rams a little bit after that win against the Raiders. Even though we still didn't, remember I said my number was 9.5 when it was 7. Of course, that ended up closing 7.5 or 8. Which honestly, in that range of a point spread is close enough. Can't believe that was at 6.5 at one point last week. That was wild. So yeah, we're gonna downgrade the Rams a little bit. Russell Wilson coming back. Maybe we forgot that he stinks. I don't know. That's how I guess we got to 2.5. Again, this is yet another 2.5 that. Yep. If we could just start, if we're just teasing them all and we just get close games, good enough, right? This game doesn't have to be good. It just has to be close at +8.5 for the Rams at home. Again, Baker Mayfield at least serviceable, even though, listen, the rest of the roster is just falling by the wayside here. You can't get me to bet on the side, on this game, or obviously the total. But yeah, you could sprinkle this in as a low leverage add-on to some teasers that don't have them in every teaser, don't have them in your big teaser. But if you're going to need some action, if you're not an NBA fan, this would be maybe that play for a +8.5 teaser leg, with maybe the next game that we're going to talk about.
Yes. Speaking of said next game, the Bucs, Tampa Bay, -6.5 at the Cards. Tom Brady, Christmas Day prime time sounded like a great idea at the start of the season,
sure.
Didn't it?
Just as Russell Wilson versus the defending champions did, right?
Right. Laying 6.5 points on the road seems like a lot to me versus anyone. But then I saw that some dude named McSorley.
Yeah, Marty.
Wow. Well played. That got me. He will be playing quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals. I feel like I've been fading the Bucs for a few weeks now and mentioned earlier that they are one of the worst teams in the NFL against the spread this season.
Yeah.
But this line, I can't believe it. I'm on the Cards here, +6.5, and there's no real reason for it. Tom Brady and company should be able to win this game by a touchdown against some dude named McSorley and a Cards team that is basically, riding out the rest of the season.
Yeah, we can assign, I said, let's try not to assign death, time of deaths to these teams because they are professionals and all of that sort of thing. And listen, Trace McSorley is going to try his heart out, right? Because he's on his 11th team, I think. He's just thrilled not to be on a practice squad at this point. But we got a cameo appearance from Trace last week against Denver. Wasn't great.
No.
Was not great, right? This wasn't a Brock Purdy cameo appearance where everything still runs relatively smoothly. This is a Trace McSorley appearance where it was, pretty rough. So, but 6.5 points though with this, with this Bucs outfit, which is one of my favorite terms to call a team, an outfit. Listen, I got this down. Let's see, where are we at for my Cardinals rating at this point? I'm at 25 on the Trace McSorley Cardinals.
Let's go.
Right? But are they worse than the Texans? Honestly,
hold on. They still got DeAndre Hopkins and stuff.
But if you can't throw it to them,
screen pass.
Maybe. And the offensive line's always been bad, and it was always kind of Kyler will be able to sort of figure it out, or Colt McCoy is going to be able to get the ball out in time. So my number with calling, let's put it this way, calling the Cardinals a 25, which is just above the Texans, puts this number at about 5.2. So halfway between 5 and 5.5. So this market at 6.5, which it moved from sort of 4.5 to up to 6.5, is telling us that the Cardinals are the worst team in the league. So you are betting right now, not on Cardinals +6.5. You are betting a yes/no bet. You are betting on no, that the Cardinals are the worst team in the league right now.
Yeah. Correct.
And if you want to go to war with that, that is absolutely fine. I'm not going to talk you out of that by any stretch of the imagination, because I'm not going to talk you into the Bucs at this point. I will say the Cardinals basically never win home games, so we shouldn't be afraid of the Bucs not winning this game outright, sort of conceptually, or more relevantly, we shouldn't be looking to take the home dog on the money line, because that's not how Cardinals games ever work, basically. But at 6.5, you got yourself a nice little Christmas teaser. I don't really like basketball, or or I'm a diehard NFL fan, +8.5. minus a half point teaser here to sort of get you through the day. Honestly,
it's true.
It's kind of all I got when it comes to
this.
It's
true.
Game, because listen, our boy, Tom Brady, who, some people like to call Tommy, telling me that there, 4 turnovers is still a pretty good game for old Tommy boy. I can't, I'm sorry, I can't lay 6.5 against literally anybody.
I hear you. And speaking of what we got for you, is one more game here. The Chargers at the Colts. Chargers favored by 4 points. Another Vegas zone line. The Colts with just an embarrassing performance after blowing that lead last week to the Minnesota Vikings. I hate the Chargers laying points, but I will be on the Chargers, plugging my nose here, taking the Chargers, and just anticipating that somehow, some way, I'll be watching Justin Herbert driving down the field, trying late to win and cover. But either way, I'm still on the Chargers.
Yeah, it sort of inherently feels like an ugly situation where like, oh man, I really don't want the Chargers laying points on the road. Then you go, well, it's on the road versus at home mean anything to the Chargers, right? Like it's not a thing, right? Like they don't have a home field advantage anyway. Basically any team, especially in that division, just ends up filling the stadium in red, orange, both silver and black.
Yeah.
Right. So like now they go to the Colts, like, yeah, listen, Colts have diehard fans, all of that sort of thing. You just blew a 33-point game last week. Are you really just rocking the house in Indianapolis on Monday night? Are you bringing the heat? Right. So this line was, the look ahead line was 3, sort of reopened 3.5, and then kind of, got it bet up to 4. This feels very sort of two ships passing in the night type of situation, right? Where the Colts, like, they've been giving it their all here with some of these games. And then it's just like, nah, it's just not working. Jonathan Taylor hurts himself. And he's like, no, I'm done. And that would be the reason to like the Colts, right? Because everybody just racks yardage against the Chargers from a tailback position. Is Deion Jackson and Zach Moss capable of that? I mean, it seems like everybody is kind of capable of that against the Chargers. But again, you're getting an extra day here of rest for the Chargers, an extra day for the Colts. But again, this, the Chargers are the team that is slowly getting healthier, right? That, still without, again, Joey Bosa, Rashawn Slater, and Derwin James. Like those are 3 really big names in 3 different, like, high leverage positions. Yeah. And if they can get James back and maybe Bosa back for this game on Monday, which we won't know for at least a couple of days, if not right up until game time. And by the way, that we talked about that Patriots loss and sort of laughed at it and commiserated about that sort of moving a W to an L, which is the infuriating part, right? Because when you tell somebody your record, or we start the show with you being 30 games above 500, we don't get to like list all of the Patriots like losses along the way that like should have been better. Now there obviously maybe should have been some wins that were actually, or some losses that were wins or whatever, but it sort of works both ways. But it feels like, when you're doing this correctly, it's going to work against you more often than not, because you're going to be in a good position late in a game more often than being in a bad position. But as I circle back to this game, point is with that game against the Patriots, or for the Patriots, or against the Patriots, whatever you want to call it, that hurts their playoff position. It helps the Chargers' position. This is a team that starts, we're starting to get a little engine kind of moving here, right? Dolphins win, Titans win, maybe get a road win against a team that's kind of playing out the schedule here, who's maybe side-eyeing their, fake coach in Jeff Saturday. And then you've got, of course, I think they go to Denver next week, which obviously they should be fired up for, because in theory, all they need here is 2 wins to clinch the playoffs. This isn't a team that had sort of low expectations. This is a team that had high expectations at the start of the season, right? And so, like, this is it. Chargers, this is it. Win as a favorite by more than 4 points. Win convincingly in an atmosphere that is a dome, fast track type atmosphere that you are used to, and then go and get it done against the Broncos next week and get into the playoffs and make it interesting with a potential matchup against, honestly, whoever in the AFC, right? Like they can play with any team, especially at full health. Like this is it. So we might end up kicking ourselves for backing the Chargers here and laying points, but the road home thing doesn't really matter. And this is, for lack of a better term, this is it. Like, go get this win.
Yeah.
Comfortably.
No, for sure. And a crazy, crazy week of NFL action here. And of course, we have games on Thursday, games on Saturday, games on Sunday, and a game on Monday, as mentioned before. And with so much going on and so much time, so many picks, so many things that can change, where can the people find you online to get the information that they so crave?
Listen, just like you, man, I'm out fighting a good fight on Twitter at MRusAuthentic. You and I both have to, the heavy is the head that wears the crown, I think is the term. We have to deal with weirdos every once in a while. And the cool thing about like the people that actually follow us is like they get it. Mm-hmm. And that's why like people, I've said to people before, like they go like, your DMs must be an absolute tragedy. And I'm like, no. Actually, the people that listen to this podcast, that read my stuff, that follow me, they want to learn. They want to sort of, commiserate on, and celebrate, as we've, talked about for years, celebrating and commiserating. And like, they're really cool. Every once in a while, you tweet something that a non-follower sees, and then they, you have to start defending your own tweets and do weird stuff. And you're like, you know what? Happy holidays and bye-bye to you. Yeah. So I just wish everyone who, listens to this, follows us, reads my stuff, happy holidays. Glad you're along with us for this ride every year. And, thrilled to have you at MRS Authentic on Twitter. And of course, the Score app. Set your notifications for betting mode.
Right. For me, I feel like everything at this point is going pretty well. Feeling okay with where we're at on the pod. Just trying to keep things clicking. And you can find me on Twitter, trying not to argue with people. But as you said, it doesn't really happen often. But every once in a while, it's just kind of like, did you just read the same words that are actually on your screen right now and understand that? Or are you coming at me with something that you think you read? Yeah. Anyways, you can follow me on Twitter at Shell Alexander and on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander. Please like and subscribe and tell your friends about the pod as the picks continue to be doing okay so far. Looking for a bounce back week this week on the pod. Get back over 500 for the week. Let's make that happen. Tell your friends. And as I always say, I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is the On Blast Podcast, NFL Picks Edition, part of the On Blast Podcast Network. As always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.